The hotel manager slammed his hand on the marble desk, so hard that the sound echoed through the entire lobby. His voice was loud, sharp, and filled with disgust. "We don't rent rooms to your kind here. This is a respectable establishment." The man standing in front of him didn't flinch. He was wearing a simple gray tracksuit, old sneakers that had seen better days, and a plain black cap pulled low over his face. No jewelry, no designer labels, no bodyguards, no cameras, just a tired traveler looking for a place to rest. His name was Muhammad Ali, but nobody in that lobby recognized him. The receptionist looked away, embarrassed but silent. Other guests whispered and stared. Some smirked. Others shook their heads, and the manager. He stood there with his chest puffed out, arms crossed, like he had just won some kind of battle. But what he didn't know, what nobody in that hotel knew, was that the man he just insulted owned the entire building. Every room, every floor, every brick, and in exactly 9 minutes, everything was about to change. Let me take you back to how this all started. It was a cold Thursday evening in downtown Chicago, 1977. The Grand Royal Hotel stood tall on Michigan Avenue, a luxury property known for its chandeliers, velvet carpets, and 5-star service. But behind the polished floors and golden decorations, something ugly was happening. The staff had become arrogant. They judged people by their clothes, their skin, their accents. If you didn't look rich, you weren't welcome. And manager Richard Covington was the worst of them all. He was a tall man in his 40s, slicked back hair, expensive cologne, gold cufflinks that caught the light every time he moved. He loved power. He loved the feeling of looking down on people. And tonight, he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Muhammad Ali had just finished a long day. He'd been visiting a youth center on the South Side, talking to kids, signing autographs, giving away boxing gloves. He didn't announce it. No press. No cameras. That's how he liked it. Quiet, real humble. But now he was exhausted. His back ached. His legs were sore. He just wanted a hot shower and a bed. He owned several hotels across the country, and the Grand Royal was one of them. He had bought it 2 years ago with one mission: to create a place where everyone, no matter their race, background, or bank account, would be treated with dignity. But he'd been hearing rumors, complaints from guests, whispers from staff, stories of people being turned away for not looking the part. So tonight, he decided to see it for himself. No entourage, no announcement, no special treatment. He wanted to walk in like any other guest and see what really happened. He pushed through the heavy glass doors at 8:47 p.m. The lobby was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen stars. Marble floors gleamed under soft golden lights. A grand piano sat in the corner, playing soft jazz. Guests in fur coats and tailored suits sipped champagne by the fireplace. And then there was Ali in his tracksuit and worn-out sneakers. He walked up to the front desk, calm and quiet. The young receptionist, a woman in her 20s with blonde hair tied in a tight bun, looked up. Her smile disappeared the moment she saw him. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone cold. "Yes, ma'am. I'd like a room for the night, please." She looked him up and down, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Do you have a reservation?" "I do, actually. Under my name, Ali." She typed slowly into the computer, barely looking at the screen. "I don't see anything here." Ali smiled gently.
Could you check again?
"It should be there." She sighed, annoyed. "Sir, even if I find it, I'm not sure this hotel is within your budget. I can pay," Ali said calmly. "Cash or card?" "Card is fine." She glanced at the old sneakers again, then leaned back in her chair. "Look, maybe you'd be more comfortable at the motel 2 blocks down. It's more affordable." Before Ali could respond, a loud voice cut through the lobby. "Is there a problem here?" Jessica, manager Richard Covington, strode over, his polished shoes clicking on the marble. He looked at Ali with the kind of expression you give someone you think doesn't belong. "No problem, Mr. Covington," Jessica said quickly. "This gentleman was just leaving." "I wasn't leaving," Ali said softly. "I was trying to check in." Richard looked him up and down with a sneer. "Check in? Here?" "Yes, sir." Richard laughed, a sharp, mocking laugh that made a few guests turn their heads. "Son, I don't know what you think this place is, but we have standards. This isn't a shelter." Ali's expression didn't change. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his ID and credit card. "I have a reservation, and I can pay." Richard barely glanced at them. "We're fully booked." Ali looked past him at the computer screen. It clearly showed 12 rooms available. "It says you have rooms," Ali said quietly. Richard's face turned red. "I said we're fully booked. Now leave before I call security." The lobby went silent. Everyone was watching now. Some guests filmed on their cameras, others whispered, and Muhammad Ali, the greatest boxer the world had ever seen, the man who had fought for civil rights, who had given up his title for his beliefs, stood there in silence, not because he was scared, but because he wanted to see how far this man would go. And then Richard said the words that would end his career. "We don't rent rooms to your kind here." The words hung in the air like poison. "We don't rent rooms to your kind here." Manager Richard Covington stood with his arms crossed, a satisfied smirk on his face. He thought he had won. He thought he had protected his precious hotel from someone unworthy. But Muhammad Ali just looked at him, not with anger, not with frustration, with sadness, because this wasn't new to him. He had heard these words before, in different places, different times, but hearing them in his own hotel, that cut deeper. Let me tell you who Manager Richard really was. He had worked at the Grand Royal for 8 years, started as a desk clerk, climbed his way up through manipulation, flattery, and stepping on anyone beneath him. When Muhammad Ali bought the hotel 2 years ago, Richard wasn't happy. A black man owning a luxury hotel on Michigan Avenue. He smiled to Ali's face during the ownership transition meeting, but behind closed doors, he mocked it. He told his staff, "Doesn't matter who owns the paperwork. I run this place, and I decide who belongs here." He believed his job was to protect the hotel's image, and in his twisted mind, that meant keeping out anyone who didn't look wealthy enough, white enough, or respectable enough. He had turned away single mothers, college students, immigrant families, war veterans, anyone whose clothes didn't scream money, and tonight he had just turned away the owner. Ali stood there for a moment, letting the words sink in. Around him, the lobby had gone completely silent. A businessman in a three-piece suit lowered his newspaper, watching. An elderly couple near the fireplace stopped talking. 2 teenage girls filming on their cameras zoomed in closer. Even the jazz piano in the corner seemed to play softer. Jessica, the receptionist, stared at her computer screen, her face red with shame. She knew this was wrong, but she also knew that speaking up against Richard meant losing her job. So she stayed quiet, like so many others had stayed quiet before. Ali took a slow breath. He could feel his heart beating steady, the way it did before a fight. But this wasn't a fight he would win with his fists. This was something different. "I understand," Ali said softly, his voice calm as still water. Richard blinked, surprised by the response. He expected anger, an argument, maybe even a scene, but Ali gave him none of that. "You don't know me," Ali continued, "and that's okay. But let me ask you something." He looked Richard straight in the eyes. "When you see someone who looks like me, what do you see?" Richard shifted uncomfortably. "I see someone who—" "You see someone who doesn't belong," Ali finished for him. "Someone you think isn't good enough." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Behind the desk, an older black bellboy named Marcus stood frozen. He was 63 years old, had worked at this hotel for 15 years. He had watched Richard humiliate countless guests. He had seen good people turned away for no reason. And he had stayed silent because he had a family to feed, bills to pay, a granddaughter in college. But now, watching this calm man in the tracksuit absorb Richard's cruelty with such grace, something in Marcus stirred. He squinted at Ali's face, the strong jawline, the way he carried himself, the quiet power in his voice, and then it hit him like a lightning bolt.
"Oh my God,"
Marcus whispered to himself. "That's him, that's Muhammad Ali." His hands started trembling. He wanted to say something to call out, to stop this madness. But before he could speak, Richard stepped closer to Ali, lowering his voice so only they could hear. "Listen to me carefully," he hissed. "I don't care what sob story you have. I don't care if you walked here from across town. This hotel has a reputation to protect, and I won't let people like you ruin it." "People like me," Ali repeated quietly. "That's right." Ali nodded slowly as if accepting defeat. "Okay," he said. "I'll leave." He turned toward the door. His shoulders relaxed, his walk unhurried. Richard watched him go, victorious. Jessica exhaled, relieved it was over. The guests went back to their champagne and conversations. And Marcus, the old bellboy, felt his heart sink. Another good man turned away, another injustice nobody would speak about. But then Ali stopped, right at the door. He didn't turn around. He just stood there, his hand on the brass handle, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Sometimes the people you look down on are the ones you should be looking up to." And then he pushed the door open and stepped into the night. Muhammad Ali walked out into the cold Chicago night. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Inside the lobby, manager Richard brushed his hands together like he had just taken out the trash. Well, he announced to no one in particular, that's how you maintain standards. A few guests nodded approvingly, but not everyone agreed. Marcus, the old bellboy, stood behind a luggage cart, his hands shaking. He had recognized Ali the moment the words left his mouth at the door. That voice, that face, that legendary calm, it was him, Muhammad Ali, the greatest. The three-time heavyweight champion of the world, the man who had refused to fight in Vietnam and lost everything for his principles, the man who had fought racism his entire life, and Marcus had just watched him get humiliated in his own hotel, because Marcus knew something Richard didn't. He had been working here the day Ali bought the property 2 years ago. He remembered the staff meeting where the new owner was introduced. Richard had been on vacation that week. He missed the whole thing, and apparently, nobody ever told him, or maybe they did, and he just didn't care to remember. Marcus looked around the lobby. Should he say something? His heart pounded in his chest. He had 15 years at this job. A pension almost within reach. But he also had a conscience, and right now it was screaming at him. Before he could decide, a young woman approached the desk. She was in her early 20s, wearing jeans and a college hoodie, carrying a backpack. Hi, I'd like to check in, please. I have a reservation under Sarah Mitchell. Jessica, the receptionist, ID, and credit card. The girl handed them over, nervous, excited. This is my first time in Chicago. I got accepted to a journalism program at Northwestern and we're fully booked. Jessica interrupted. But I have a confirmation email. I booked this 3 weeks ago. Richard appeared like a vulture. Let me see that. He glanced at the email on her phone for half a second. System error. Nothing we can do. Try the Motel 6 on State Street. But I already paid a deposit. Refunds take 7-10 business days. Next. The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she walked away. An older black gentleman in a military uniform stood up from his seat by the fireplace. His chest was decorated with medals. His posture was straight, dignified. He had been watching everything. Excuse me, he said, his voice firm. I'd like to speak with you, manager. Richard turned, already annoyed. Yes, I'm Colonel James Washington, retired Army. I've stayed at this hotel a dozen times, and what I just witnessed is disgraceful. I don't know what you're talking about. That man you turned away, and that young woman. You didn't even try to help them. Richard's jaw tightened. Sir, with all due respect, I'm doing my job. If you don't like how I run things, you're welcome to leave as well. The colonel stared at him for a long moment. Then he picked up his coat and walked toward the door. I will leave, he said quietly. And I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of place this really is. Richard laughed. Go ahead, we have a waiting list. But Marcus couldn't stay silent anymore. He stepped forward, his voice shaking. Mr. Covington. Sir, that man who just left, what about him? I think you should know who he was. Some nobody trying to get a free handout. Why would I care? Because that was Muhammad Ali. The lobby went silent. Jessica's head snapped up from her computer. A few guests gasped. Richard froze for just a second, then burst out laughing. Muhammad Ali? Are you senile, Marcus? Muhammad Ali is a millionaire. He wouldn't walk in here dressed like a homeless person. But sir, he owns... Nof! Richard shouted. Get back to work before I write you up. I don't have time for your conspiracy theories. Marcus stepped back, defeated. But a businessman near the desk pulled out his phone. He had filmed the whole interaction, and he was already typing. Jessica leaned toward Richard, whispering nervously. What if Marcus is right? What if that really was him? Then he should have identified himself. Richard snapped. I'm not a mind reader. How am I supposed to know who every random person is? But the computer shows he owns the hotel. His name is literally on the... I don't care what the computer says. I've worked here for 8 years. I know what this hotel needs, and what it doesn't need is people who don't fit our image. He straightened his tie, looking around the lobby with pride. This is MY Hotel. I run it, I protect it, and I decide who belongs here. Outside, Muhammad Ali sat in his car parked across the street. He wasn't angry. He was heartbroken. This was supposed to be a place of dignity, of equality, of respect. That's why he bought it. But clearly, his message hadn't reached everyone. He looked at his watch. 8:56 p.m. His assistant and the hotel's legal team were scheduled to arrive at 9:00 p.m. for a planned meeting about renovations. 4 more minutes. Ali took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. He wasn't running away. He was giving them one more chance. As he walked back toward the hotel entrance, he whispered to himself, "Let's see if they learn, or if they fall." Inside, Richard Covington stood at the center of the lobby, chest puffed out, completely unaware that his entire career was about to end. Marcus watched from the corner, praying silently, and Jessica stared at her computer screen, where the owner's name glowed clearly, primary owner Muhammad Ali. The clock on the wall ticked closer to 90 ordered p.m. 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, and then the front doors burst open. The glass doors swung open with force. 3 men in black suits walked in, moving fast, their faces serious. They carried leather briefcases and folders stamped with the hotel's corporate logo. Behind them, 2 more people entered, a woman in a sharp blazer holding a tablet, and a security consultant with an earpiece. The lobby, which had been buzzing with quiet conversation, went completely silent. Manager Richard Covington turned around, confused. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked, trying to sound authoritative. The lead executive, a tall man with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses, didn't even look at him. His eyes scanned the lobby. "Where is Mr. Ali?" Richard blinked. "Excuse me, Muhammad Ali. We have a scheduled meeting with him at 9 p.m. Where is he?" "Jessica." The receptionist felt her stomach drop. Marcus, the old bellboy, closed his eyes and whispered, "Oh no." Richard laughed nervously. "I think there's been some confusion. Muhammad Ali doesn't. He owns this hotel." The executive interrupted sharply, "And we're his legal and operations team. Now where is he?" The color drained from Richard's face.
"Hey, what?"
At that exact moment, Muhammad Ali walked back through the entrance, calm, quiet, still wearing his tracksuit. The executive team turned immediately. "Mr. Ali," the lead man said, relief flooding his face. "We've been trying to reach you, sir. We were worried when you didn't answer your phone." Ali smiled gently. "I turned it off. Wanted to see something for myself." He looked around the lobby, at the frozen staff, the stunned guests, and finally at manager Richard Covington. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Richard felt his entire world tilt.
Wait.
Richard stammered, his voice cracking. You're Muhammad Ali?" "I am," Ali said simply. "And you own this hotel?" "I do." The briefcase in Richard's mind opened and everything spilled out. The tracksuit, the worn sneakers, the humble demeanor, the man he had mocked, the man he had insulted, the man whose check he didn't burn, but whose dignity he tried to destroy, was his boss. "Oh God," Richard whispered. Jessica stood up from her desk, her hands covering her mouth. Marcus stepped forward slowly, his eyes wet with tears, not of sadness but of vindication. The guests pulled out their phones, recording everything. This was about to go viral. One of the executives, a woman named Patricia, stepped forward with her tablet. "Mr. Ali, we have the quarterly reports ready. But first, we noticed some concerning patterns in the complaint logs." "Tell me," Ali said, his voice steady. Patricia scrolled through her screen. "In the past 6 months, we've received 47 formal complaints about discriminatory behavior at this location, guests being turned away without cause, reservations mysteriously disappearing, staff being hostile to customers based on appearance." She looked up at Richard. Most of the complaints mentioned the same name, manager Richard Covington. Richard's legs felt weak. "Those complaints they're exaggerated. People lie when they don't get what they want." "I don't think they lied," Ali interrupted quietly. "Because I just experienced it myself. The lobby was so silent you could hear the chandelier crystals tinkling in the air conditioning." Ali turned to address everyone, staff, guests, everyone watching. "I bought this hotel 2 years ago for one reason," he began, his voice carrying across the marble floors. "I wanted to create a place where every person, no matter what they looked like, where they came from, or how much money they had, would be treated with dignity." He paused. "Tonight, I walked in here as a test. No announcement. No special treatment. Just a tired man looking for a room." He looked directly at Richard. "And I was told that people like me don't belong here." Richard opened his mouth, but no words came out. "I was judged by my clothes, by my appearance, by whatever assumptions were made about who I am." Ali's voice grew stronger, not with anger, but with disappointment. "And what hurts the most is that I'm not the first. That young college girl, the Connell with the medals. How many others have walked through these doors and been turned away?" Marcus couldn't hold back anymore. He stepped forward, his voice shaking but clear. "Mr. Ali, sir. I'm sorry. I recognized you. I knew who you were. And I should have said something sooner." Ali turned to him, and his expression softened. What's your name? Marcus, sir. Marcus Green. I've worked here 15 years. And why didn't you speak up, Marcus? The old man's eyes filled with tears. Because I was scared. Scared of losing my job. Scared of being next. Ali nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. Fear makes us silent when we should be loud, he said quietly. But courage isn't the absence of fear, Marcus. It's speaking up despite it. He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. You spoke up tonight. Late, but you spoke up? That takes strength. Richard, watching this unfold, suddenly dropped to his knees. Right there in the middle of the lobby. His expensive suit crumpled on the marble floor. Mr. Ali, sir, please. He begged, his voice breaking. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was you. If I had known, Ali raised his hand, stopping him. That, he said, his voice sad but firm, is exactly the problem. He looked down at the kneeling manager. You didn't need to know who I was. You should have treated me with respect because I'm a human being. The words hung in the air like a judge's gavel. Patricia stepped forward with her tablet again. Mr. Ali, what would you like us to do? Ali looked around the lobby one more time. At Marcus, standing tall despite his tears. At Jessica, ashamed and silent at her desk. At the guests, recording every second. And at Richard, still on his knees, trembling. Call an emergency staff meeting. Ali said quietly. Everyone, right now? Yes, sir.
And Patricia?
Yes, Mr. Ali. Get me the employee files for everyone who's worked here in the last 2 years. I want to know who's been protecting this behavior and who's been suffering under it. He turned back to Richard one last time. You and I, Ali said, are going to have a conversation you'll never forget. 10 minutes later, the hotel's conference room was packed. Every single staff member had been called in. Housekeepers still in their uniforms. Kitchen staff with flour on their aprons. Valets. Bellboys. Desk clerks. Maintenance workers. Even the off-duty employees who lived nearby were rushing through the door. Nobody knew exactly what was happening. But everybody knew it was serious. Muhammad Ali sat at the head of the long table, still in his tracksuit, his hands folded calmly in front of him. His legal team stood along the wall, tablets glowing, taking notes. And manager Richard Covington sat 3 seats down, his face pale, his expensive suit suddenly looking too tight. Ali spoke first, his voice quiet but commanding. Thank you all for coming on short notice. I know some of you just finished your shifts. I appreciate you being here. He looked around the room, making eye contact with each person. My name is Muhammad Ali. I own this hotel.
Some of you know that?
Some of you don't? A few employees nodded. Others looked shocked. Tonight, I came here dressed like an ordinary guest. No announcement, no cameras, no special treatment. He paused, and I was refused service. Gasps echoed through the room, not because the hotel was full, not because there was a problem with my reservation, but because someone decided I didn't look like I belonged here. A young housekeeper named Maria raised her hand nervously. Yes, Ali said gently. Mr. Ali, sir. This happens all the time. The room went silent. Richard shot her a deadly look, but Ali gestured for her to continue. Please. Tell me. Maria's voice shook, but she pushed forward. Last month, a black family came for their daughter's graduation celebration. They had a reservation. They were dressed nicely. But Mr. Covington told them the reservation was lost and sent them away. That's not, Richard started. I'm not finished. Maria said, her voice stronger now. 2 weeks ago, an elderly Hispanic couple came in. They spoke broken English. Mr. Covington laughed at their accent and told security to escort them out. Said they were probably lost. Another employee spoke up, James, a young valet. He makes us rate guests when they pull up. If their car isn't expensive enough, he tells us to park them in the back lot and take our time bringing their car around. Teach them a lesson, he says. That's standard hospitality protocol. Richard tried again. It's discrimination, Ali said firmly. And it ends tonight. Patricia, the executive, pulled up her tablet. Mr. Ali, we have documentation here. Over the past 18 months under Mr. Covington's management, this location has seen a 34% drop in diverse clientele. Meanwhile, complaints have increased by 61%. She swiped through screens. We also found internal emails where Mr. Covington instructed staff to use discretion. When accepting reservations from certain demographics, Richard's face turned red. Those emails are taken out of context. There is no context, Ali said, his voice like steel. That makes bigotry acceptable. Marcus, the old bellboy, stood up slowly. Mr. Ali, may I say something? Of course, Marcus. And I've worked here 15 years, And I've watched good people get turned away. People who just wanted a safe place to sleep. Families celebrating anniversaries. Kids on their first business trips. His voice cracked. I stayed quiet because I needed this job. Because I have a granddaughter in college and medical bills and a mortgage. But staying quiet made me part of the problem. He looked at Richard. And I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. For everyone who got hurt because I was too scared. Allie stood and walked over to Marcus, placing both hands on his shoulders. Marcus, fear is a cage. But you just broke out of it. That's courage. Jessica, the receptionist, suddenly burst into tears. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry, Mr. Allie. I knew it was wrong. Every time. But he said if I didn't follow his rules, I'd be fired. I have student loans, I have rent. I didn't know what to do. Allie looked at her with compassion, not anger. Jessica, how old are you? 23, sir. And how long have you worked here? 8 months. Allie nodded slowly. So you were trained to treat people this way? You were taught that this was normal? Yes, sir. Then you're not the disease. Allie said gently. You're a symptom. He turned back to Richard. But you're the infection. Richard stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor.
This is ridiculous.
I have built this hotel's reputation. I increased revenue by 18% last year. I have awards, commendations. You have numbers. Allie interrupted. But you lost something more important. What? Humanity. The word echoed through the conference room. Allie walked slowly toward Richard, his presence filling the space. You can make all the money in the world. You can have the fanciest lobby, the highest ratings, the most 5-star reviews. But if you build it on the backs of people's dignity, you've built nothing. Richard's jaw clenched. So what are you going to do? Fire me? Sue me? Allie stopped right in front of him. I'm going to give you a choice. The room held its breath. You can resign right now. Leave quietly. Take your awards and your commendations and go. I won't drag your name through the courts. I won't make this public. Richard's eyes narrowed. Or I release everything. Every email. Every complaint. Every witness statement. And the world will know exactly who Richard Covington really is. Allie's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Your career. Your reputation. Your future, all of it will be defined by your hatred. And that's a legacy that will follow you forever. Richard stood there shaking, sweat beading on his forehead. His empire was crumbling. His power was gone. And for the first time in 8 years, he was facing consequences. He started, his voice barely audible. I need time to think.
No,
Allie said. You don't, because while you're thinking, good people are being hurt. So decide. Right now, Patricia held up a resignation letter, already prepared. Sign this, and you walk out with some dignity intact. Refuse, and we move forward with legal action. The clock on the wall ticked. 30 seconds. 45 seconds. 1 minute. Richard's hand trembled as he reached for the pen. Richard Covington's hand hovered over the pen. His entire body was shaking. Around him, 20 pairs of eyes watched in complete silence. This was the man who had ruled this hotel like a king. The man who had decided who belonged and who didn't. The man who had made people feel small so he could feel big. And now, in this moment, he had no power left, just a choice. He grabbed the pen. His signature was messy, rushed, angry. He slammed the pen down on the table and stood up, his chair falling backward with a crash. You'll regret this, Richard hissed, pointing at Allie. This hotel will fall apart without me. You'll see. Allie didn't flinch. No. Richard. It will finally become what it was always meant to be. Richard grabbed his coat and stormed toward the door. But before he left, he turned one last time. You people? He spat, looking at Marcus, at Maria, at Jessica. You're all fools. You think he cares about you? He's just putting on a show. In 6 months, you'll all be replaced by. That's enough. Allie said, his voice still calm but firm as iron. Leave with whatever dignity you have left. Richard's face twisted with rage and humiliation. He threw open the door and disappeared into the hallway. They heard his footsteps echoing. Then the sound of the elevator. Then, silence. Nobody spoke. It was like the entire room had been holding its breath and didn't know if it was safe to exhale. Then Marcus started clapping, slow at first. Then Maria joined. Then James the valet, then Jessica. Soon the entire room erupted in applause. Some people were crying. Others were hugging. The weight that had been pressing down on them for years, the fear, the silence, the shame, was finally lifted. Ollie raised his hand gently, and the room quieted. I need to be honest with you all, he said. I didn't come here tonight to fire anyone. I came to learn the truth. He looked around at each face. And the truth is, this hotel has been broken. Not the building, not the business, the soul of it. He walked slowly through the room as he spoke. Some of you participated in the discrimination. Some of you stayed silent. Some of you were victims of it. He stopped at Jessica's chair. Jessica, you said you were taught that this was normal. That this was how hotels operate. She nodded, tears still streaming down her face. It's not. Allie said gently. And from today forward, you'll be taught something different. Respect, dignity, equality. He looked at Patricia. I want a complete retraining program for every staff member. Starting tomorrow. Yes, sir. Allie turned to Marcus, who was standing at attention. Decades of military-like discipline in his posture. Marcus, you've been here 15 years.
Yes, sir.
You've seen everything. You know this hotel inside and out. You know the guests, the systems, the problems. I do, sir. Allie smiled. Then you're the new general manager. The room gasped. Marcus's eyes went wide. Sir, I'm just a bellboy. I don't have a college degree. I don't have management experience. You have something more important. Allie interrupted. You have integrity. You have compassion. And you finally found your courage. Marcus's legs felt weak. Mr. Allie, I don't know what to say. Say yes. Marcus wiped his eyes, overwhelmed.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. The room erupted in applause again. Allie turned to Maria, the housekeeper who had spoken up first. Maria, you risked your job to tell the truth tonight. That takes strength. I couldn't stay quiet anymore, she said. How would you feel about becoming the director of guest relations? Maria's mouth fell open. Me? But I clean rooms. You understand what guests need. You see them as human beings. That's exactly what this position requires. Maria covered her face with her hands and nodded, unable to speak. One by one, Allie went through the room. James the valet became the new head of front-line services. A quiet maintenance worker named David, who had been secretly helping turned away guests find other hotels, became the diversity and inclusion coordinator. Jessica was kept on as a receptionist but enrolled in a leadership development program. You made mistakes, Allie told her. But you're young, you can learn, you can grow, and you can be part of the solution. When Allie had finished, he stood at the head of the table again. I want to be clear about something, he said. This isn't charity. This isn't me being nice. This is me investing in people who have character. He paused. Money comes and goes. Buildings rise and fall. But character is permanent. He looked at every person in that room. From tonight forward, the Grand Royal Hotel has one rule. Every guest who walks through those doors is treated with respect. No matter their clothes, no matter their car, no matter their skin color or accent or bank account. His voice grew stronger. We don't ask people to prove they belong here. Because everyone belongs here. Marcus stood up, his voice thick with emotion. Mr. Ali, I promise you we won't let you down. Ali smiled, that famous warm smile that had lit up 1,000 boxing rings and press conferences. I know you won't, Marcus. Because you're not doing this for me. You're doing it for every person who's been turned away. Every family that's been humiliated. Every kid who's been told they're not good enough. He walked toward the door, then turned back one last time. Make this hotel a place where people are seen, where they're welcomed, where they're welcome, Marcus said, and the entire room echoed, we will. Ali walked out of the conference room and back into the lobby. It was nearly 10 p.m. now. The same crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. The same marble floors gleamed under the lights. But something had changed. Everything had changed. He walked up to the front desk where a new clerk had just started the night shift. Good evening, sir. How can I help you? She asked with a genuine smile. I'd like a room, please, Ali said. Of course. Let me get you checked in right away. Welcome to the Grand Royal Hotel. Ali smiled. Finally. This was what he'd built it for. Muhammad Ali checked into room 4012 that night, the same room he had been denied just 2 hours earlier. He stood by the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline, the city lights twinkling like distant stars, and he thought about all the people who had been turned away from places they had every right to be. Not just from hotels, from schools, from jobs, from opportunities, from dignity. The next morning, the story broke. One of the guests had posted their video online. Muhammad Ali denied service at his own hotel. Within hours, it had 10 million views. Within days, it was international news. But what surprised people wasn't the discrimination. Sadly, that wasn't new. What surprised them was what Ali did next. He didn't sue. He didn't seek revenge. He didn't destroy Richard publicly. He gave second chances to the people who deserved them. He promoted the ones who had courage. And he taught a lesson bigger than any lawsuit could. 6 months later, the Grand Royal Hotel was transformed. Under Marcus's leadership, it became known as the most welcoming hotel in Chicago. They trained every employee in respect, dignity, and cultural sensitivity. They created a scholarship program for young people from underprivileged backgrounds who wanted to work in hospitality. They hung a simple sign in the lobby that read, "Everyone belongs here, no exceptions," and beneath it, a quote from Muhammad Ali, "Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth." Maria, the former housekeeper, now ran the guest relations department. She personally greeted families, veterans, immigrants, students, anyone who walked through those doors. And whenever someone looked nervous or out of place, she would smile and say, "Welcome home." Marcus became one of the most respected managers in the industry. He never forgot where he came from, and he never let fear silence him again. Jessica, the young receptionist, graduated from the leadership program and became an advocate for diversity training in hotels across the country. She spoke at conferences about her experience, about learning from mistakes, about growth. "I was taught wrong," she would say, "but I chose to learn right." As for Richard Covington, he never worked in hospitality again. His name became a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when power is built on cruelty. Some say he moved to another state, took a quiet job, lived a small life. Others say he never learned, never changed, just found new ways to be bitter. But the truth is, it doesn't matter what happened to Richard. What matters is what happened to everyone else. Muhammad Ali never publicly spoke about that night. He didn't need to. His actions spoke louder than any words could. He proved that real power isn't about control. It's about compassion. Real strength isn't about making others feel small. It's about lifting them up. And real leadership isn't about who you can push down. It's about who you can raise up. Years later, a young black boy walked into the Grand Royal Hotel with his mother. He was nervous, wearing his best clothes, clutching a basketball scholarship letter. They were there to celebrate. Marcus saw them at the door and walked over personally. "Welcome," he said warmly. "What are we celebrating today?" The boy showed him the letter. Beaming with pride, Marcus shook his hand firmly. "Congratulations, young man. You've earned this." As they checked in, the boy whispered to his mother, "Mom, this is the nicest place I've ever been." She smiled, tears in her eyes. "That's because they see you, baby. Really see you." And that's exactly what Muhammad Ali had built. Not just a hotel, a place where everyone was seen, where everyone mattered, where everyone belonged. The greatest didn't just fight in the ring. He fought for dignity, for respect, for equality. And his biggest victory wasn't a championship belt. It was changing hearts. One person, one moment, one choice at a time. Respect isn't something you show only to the powerful. It's something you show to everyone, especially when you think no one's watching. Because the person you look down on today might be the person you look up to tomorrow. But more importantly, every person deserves respect simply because they're human. True power is silent. True strength is humble. True greatness is measured by how you treat the people who can do nothing for you. Type respect in the comments if you believe kindness is real strength. Type Marfius if he inspired you. Type ALI if the greatest touched your heart. And tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city, your country, your corner of the world. Because this message needs to reach everywhere. From Chicago to Cairo. From New York to New Delhi. From Los Angeles to London. Respect has no borders. Dignity has no price tag. And humanity has no exceptions. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing that we can all be better. Thank you for choosing kindness. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And remember, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, but most importantly, treat everyone with dignity. That's the legacy of Muhammad Ali. That's the legacy we all should leave.